We have all drooled over Vikrant Massey even though he was a Rakshasa in the Netflix film Cargo. But unlike Indian sci-fi, Massey was not the only good thing about it. The film was not only received well by the audience, it was also critically acclaimed. We have Arati Kadav, the director who made it happen, here with us. Joining the conversation with Arati, we have sci-fi writer and pop culture curator Gautham Shenoy.
Firstly, thank you to the New Indian Express for this session, for this invitation, and inviting me to be a part of the inaugural Dakshin Lit Fest. And it's a pleasure to have Arati Kadav with me to speak about science fiction in the South and in India overall. Arati, if you'd like to say something.
No, thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, I've been also following you for a while. So it's nice to have a conversation with a true sci-fi nerd, the only one I know in India. So, I'm very happy to be here today.
The topic says, is science fiction and fantasy, in India on a high. I would say so. I would think so, especially in the last couple of years. I'll of course speak more from the page perspective, from the book perspective, and you can do the leap to the from the screen.
Yes.
I mean, as both of us know, and everybody knows, we have a long-running tradition of fantastic literature in India, not just in the modern era, but also our legends and all of those. If you take which stretch back centuries, are all fantastic in nature, with fantastic beasts and all. Of course, tending more towards fantasy than science fiction. And then in the modern era, we've had a lot of science fiction. I mean, it's a century old, more than a century old at least, the tradition of science fiction in India, both in English and in all the regional languages. And one thing I've noticed, I mean, we've always had a whole bunch of geeks, in India. I mean, of course, because my generation, we were probably because we were brought up on a steady diet of science fiction programming, even in Doordarshan.
Yes.
be it your Captain Vyoms and your Indradhanushes and all of those things, and Space City Sigma, which later we found out was a nice ripoff of Star Trek, but but it just felt so Indian, and I guess that's where for most of us we found our love for science fiction and fantasy. Was that same with you?
Yeah, and actually for me, because I was from a very studious kind of family, we never had access to cable or anything like that. Only I remember just one summer holiday when I was with my cousins and we all saw Matrix, and that was my first tryst with science fiction. Like, and I was pretty old by the time I saw Matrix, but like I remember when I saw it, I was like just blown over because there were things that it was talking about. It was working at it, and I was still a kid. I would say I said I was old, but still a small, kid. Like, but I was seeing that it's working at it multiple levels, like, not just at the story level, but philosophically it was, and it was like very mind bending, right? Like, so for me, that was my first tryst in general. But, and besides that, of course, I consumed a lot of Amar Chitra Kathas and a lot of those books. And that's where I got my science fiction from, like those Mahabharatas and whatever, the Panchtantra comics. So that was my entry into science fiction, really from, deep Indian mythology to Matrix. So all those things together, then Alien and whatever Star movies dished out, like consumed it. The Fly, which like, really scarred me for life. The Fly, which I saw as a kid. So, stories like this, I really miss the whole TV wave because, we never had cable TV. So I missed it. Like, we used to just be very studious in my house. So, yeah.
No, what I'm talking about is, of course, pre-cable days, like mid to late 80s and all this sort of thing. And then there was like a huge gap. And in the past few years, what I've seen is, it's really sort of taken off, at least as far as literature is concerned. And like for example, a couple of years ago we had Magical Women. I mean, since we'll start with the South and then move pan India. There was this lovely anthology called Magical Women, edited by Sukanya Venkatraghavan, and she's also the author of Dark Things, and it was a fabulous anthology with And what made it extra special was that it was probably the first feminist SF anthology in the whole region, so to speak. And it was an all women author, roster.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a move. And what I liked especially was the fact that you go into a bookstore. Once upon a time, you'd find a small section, just sort of science fiction or fantasy sort of bunged in, as an apology. But if you walk in now, you have like a whole section, racks and racks of it. And then once upon a time, they would be full of just the Asimovs and Arthur C. Clarke and Lord of the Rings.
Really,
We're talking books that are published in the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. And it was very hard to sort of come across books by Indian writers, which, especially in this genre, which, had people like us, with people with names that, that come from the cities that we live in, or speak about the situations that, we go through, or that come from the Indian literary tradition, so to speak. And that, has really, I mean, I would call it some sort of a SFF renaissance. I'm sure you've noticed that too.
Yeah, I think, and I can speak from filmmaking point of view, because I've had a long struggle, like 5 to 7 years. Eventually, when I made Cargo, I ended up producing it myself, because really no producers was keen on making science fiction. And especially a big part of my struggle was around 4 years ago, when it was like, things have really changed in last 4 to 5 years, because 5 years ago, the producers would just shut the door. The mob, I mean, in fact, I have like really email from the top guys, like, we are open to making films except science fiction. So it was like anything but science fiction. It was not just that, like, that they're curious about it. They were like, we know it will not work. They were so sure about it. And so from there, and now suddenly, I think with the, the changes coming, the whole wave comes from everywhere, right? From literature, and now with the OTTs coming in. So now they're opening up to those ideas. So now at least, see, it's not that people are still saying, okay, we want to make your science fiction. But when I say I have a science fiction idea, they turn, or at least when they think, okay, we want to make science fiction, let's at least have a conversation with her. And I know a lot of people, now a lot of people also, so all kinds of content will be made. I know some content that they're making, or they're trying to, remake those Twilight series in Indian context. So those are the other things that are happening. But as of now, I'm like, everything or anything is welcome, because I've seen that stage when there was like completely, the science fiction was complete no. Especially I'm talking about north of India, because they're very conservative, and especially the earlier traditional producers were very conservative and playing with the narratives. The OTT has given a lot of stimulus to them, like now they're also experimenting there. So I think and it's happening. And as you said that, like with the books coming, and I think overall also the story is, I think the traditional Asimov or traditional Philip K. Dick never catered to Indian social, cultural, as you said, I cannot imagine me or anyone I know to be part of a Philip K. Dick story, because the whole setup is so remote. I mean, I cannot connect it with it either at personal level, either at, social society level or cultural level. But when you have magical stories coming from India by Indian authors, you can connect to them. And now people are trying to make films out of series of books written by Indian authors. I think one of them is, I'm forgetting the name, one of the Indian authors, but his book is now circulating, who writes sci-fi, whose book is circulating. People are saying, oh, let's make a series out of this. The Turbulence, the book is Turbulence.
Yeah,
so people
Samit Basu,
So people are now keen that, okay, now we have Indian sci-fi writers whose books represent us and our science fiction, and let's try to make it. So as you said, we're in a very golden phase as far as, and it's a very delightful place to be in, because I always feel that the inception stage is always the most passionate stage, because we are not doing it because we are getting money for it. We're doing it because we want to do it. Like later on, people jump in because they will get, oh, science fiction mein paisa hai, which is world over, right? It enjoys a mainstream status world over, science fiction, but that's not true for India. It is
from a pop culture perspective, if you look at it, right? I mean, if you look at the Comic Cons that happen in India, I mean, it happens in Hyderabad, it happens in Bombay, it happens in Delhi, it happens in Bangalore. You see the crowds coming in.
Yeah.
You know that there is acceptance for science fiction, fantasy, and the comics and all those associated narratives. And if you look at the films that are becoming blockbusters worldwide, and by extension even in India, or the series that people are talking about on OTT, be it a Stranger Things or a Dark, all of them are science fiction.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm glad you mentioned Turbulence, because that's one series that I would love to see.
Yeah.
I mean, while people talk about, like, say, The Boys, which is an amazing sort of take on the superhero genre, Turbulence and Resistance, Samit Basu's Turbulence and Resistance is the same. And I absolutely love the line in it when it said, Superman was real and he was Indian.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the setup is so nice. I mean, people in a flight take off from London,
and
they encounter turbulence, and when they land in
super.
India, there's a plane load full of I won't say superheroes, superpowered individuals, because some of them become good, some of them become bad, and all that. And even for that matter, if you look at something like a Simoquin Prophecies, again by Samit Basu, which also happens to be the first Indian fantasy novel in English. It's a fabulous Indian story which sort of mashes up Indian mythology and epic fantasy, the Tolkien-esque epic fantasy, and the humor of a Terry Pratchett, but it's just so Indian.
Yes.
It just feels so Indian, and I think the time is now right that, I mean, hello, producers, streaming channels, if you're looking for things to adapt, look at these two. I mean, you have a ready audience. And while we're on the topic, I mean, his latest book, Chosen Spirits, was shortlisted for the JCB Prize. It was in JCB Prize, as everyone knows, is like India's sort of biggest, richest literary prize, and it was nice to see them look at Chosen Spirits, which is a speculative fiction book. I mean, it's a book that's set in India of the 2030s, and Samit Basu calls it an anti-dystopia book. It's set in India, and it talks about the things that we are all going through and are familiar with right now, and that to me is, it is sort of, like I said, sort of a good indication of the sort of renaissance in Indian SF that's happening.
Yes, and it will be fun to see, stories of Indian authors in science fiction, because then they will have an element of originality. Because otherwise, we shouldn't be like, when we start making science fiction, we shouldn't look like, okay, we copied this film from the Hollywood, or this film from Japan, or this film from China. It should look like you made something that was truly Indian. So I think it's nice that we have science fiction movement supported by great writers. So it's nice.
No, I'm glad you brought that point out. I mean, because otherwise, many time it's sometimes you just change the names around and it could be anywhere. But the books like Chosen Spirits and stuff like that, they it can't be anywhere but in India. For example, earlier this year there was this book called Analog Virtual and Other Simulations of Your Future by this. It was a debut novel of Lavanya Lakshminarayan, and it is set in the Bangalore of the future. So it is nice to see, okay, I mean, we've only seen, when aliens attack, they always go for the White House, and they always go for the Golden Gate Bridge and all those things, or it's always set in New York, and but here was a story. I mean, it's a bunch of stories, interlinked stories with recurring themes and characters, which is set in a Bangalore of the future. Of course, Bangalore has now been renamed as Apex City. And it's run by this corporation called the Bell Corporation, which judges everything like the classic HR method of the bell curve, right? So you have to be productive and all of those. And it was nice to see sort of Bangalore landmarks, mentioned, be it Minsk Square and all. And these are, practically neighborhoods, so to speak. Or for that matter, another great book which came out this year was Gautham Bhatia's The Wall. more famous as a lawyer and for writing books like this Transformative Constitution, and he's also a huge SFF
Fan.
geek. So his
Mhm.
debut novel came out, and very strong female character called Mithila, about, and who's one of many thousands of people living in a enclosed city,
Yeah.
right, and nobody can go in or come out. The city is called Sumer. Nobody can come in or go out, and how these, and she yearns for freedom and to go beyond the walls and all. It's all also very Indian. While, as of course, as with any classic science fiction literature, it talks about the human condition, and there is a sense of universality to all of these books, but it feels just so very Indian. And
Yeah.
again, I think it would make a great OTT series. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you should look at that as your next
Just
project.
partner with those guys and pitch it. Yeah.
And speaking of this thing, I mean, even in the South, for example, I mean, you were speaking about how people in the North, they may be a little orthodox or whatever. That way, I think in the South, we have, we had Android Kunjapan version 2.5.
Yeah, I love
This is
how
a
they're
very,
fearless, how they bring in the politics into their, especially, those films. They bring in sci-fi, but they also bring in the regional politics, the regional prejudice. So it feels like so integrated. So the science fiction is not an as an element is not sticking out. It's not something you've pasted over, Kerala. It's something. It feels like this thing is navigating that landscape, and that landscape is also trying to understand the presence of a Japanese robot in its lands. So I think that's what is very exciting about, and especially when good filmmakers take up, when Lee Joseph, good filmmakers take up science fiction. I know that they're gonna create a revolution. Like, if they're gonna create something that we all will be like, yeah, super excited to see.
yeah. I
So
mean, literally,
yeah,
I'm looking forward to the next film, Churuli, which
truly,
seems,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's so very intriguing. The trailer is so promising. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
it's good days. It's good days. Yeah. So
Yes,
if somebody
yes.
said is sci-fi on a high, yes, sci-fi is on a high, fantasy is on a high in India, but I hope it hasn't peaked.
No, no, it's far from peaked. I think once the door opens, there'll be no going back, because once even the filmmaker, I think also as a filmmaker, once you discover sci-fi, it's tough to go back, because it's very exciting, like science fiction. Because it's not just, when you talk about science fiction, we not just talk about all those fantasy elements or all those, what if kind of scenarios. We actually use science fiction to talk about here and now. It's the best tool and best device to actually investigate reality. And because what you do is you try to exaggerate the circumstances, and then you get a better view of those things. Like, so I think science fiction is such a fantastic tool, even to explore real stories and real challenges that we face. Like, so I think, like, once filmmakers discover science fiction or writers discover science fiction, they will be, it's like, yeah, now they'll not be able to go back to vanilla stories. Like, yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, which is why I was quite happy to see Cargo trending at number one on Netflix.
Yeah,
For quite a while, and it was there in the
yeah.
top 10 for quite a while.
Yeah, we were, yeah, for 2 weeks we were number one, and then we went on, like, the third week was when we started going down. Like, and we are like, oh gosh, because I was telling, oh, we should aim for a month, and the teammates like, how do we aim for a month? I said, no, no, just mentally aim for a month, rest people will do. Like, but yeah, I mean, we didn't expect that, frankly speaking, because it's a very different kind of film. It's a very sublime also kind of film, so we were not sure. We did see, even now I personally feel that the film was received well, much better outside India, for in the festival circuit. At least the kind of response we had from a lot of festival heads, and still they are all in touch. So when
You
it
you won
came
the award
here,
at the Miami Film Festival. You won the
yes,
prize,
yes,
right?
we won the prize there, and even the we got very good reviews from Variety, which, it's tough to get good reviews from some of the very tough reviewers. Like, they are very hard to please reviewers. They also liked our film, like a lot of people, and even the production houses from the US who saw the film in South by Southwest reached out to us and saying, "Oh, it's so exciting to see a little, science fiction like this from India," and they hadn't seen something like that. Plus, Cargo is not a typical spaceship film, and they are so used to a little different kind of one-toned spaceship film. So they found this very colorful, and so they were liking it. So I think the OTTs are great, but initially there were resistance throughout, because they all were wondering whether people will like the film or not. They said it's an arty film. So I said, कि arty but science spaceship bhi hai." Like, so, so wo bhi to hai, like, so they used to feel that. But they were surprised actually when it came out. The reception, especially genuinely, as you said, right? Like the young kids. I can't even tell you the amount of college film clubs invited me and spoke to me, right from Pilani to Arati to, like, various engineering colleges, because, and the kids, like, I mean, literally at the time I was in Zoom call with like 300 kids, and all of them like were visible, and they were so excited to discuss the film and talk about it. So then you feel that, oh my god, so see, so much is this scope, so how much more we can push. And in fact, the things that we were thinking that, oh, this is absurd, maybe people will not get it, because you also get conditioned with all the feedback that you get, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But people are actually liking the absurd and the leap of faith more than the more traditional stuff. So that was also very exciting for me to see that, okay, now we should not be so, we can be a little unhinged, like we can go out there, have fun, try to raise budget and do it like right now, like, so we were very excited. It was very encouraging for the team as such.
yeah. And not just as a science fiction fan or as somebody who loved Cargo, why I loved the fact that it was a success is that it'll probably pave the way for more such films to come, right?
Yes.
All you need is that one or two sort of breakout films,
Yeah.
which come from here, and then it becomes easier, because then the producers or the people with the
Yeah.
checks will point to Cargo and say, hey, hame bhi waisa film
Yeah.
chahiye,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We want
I
to
think so. That's
film
true.
like that. We want to
Yeah,
film like
and
that.
that's true. And that's what we were. That's the feedback we got from people who were in the industry. They said that to make a science fiction, because it has had so many false starts as such. So if the start is right, it kind of paves way for future films. It lets other people experiment, and even the producers don't shy away. They said, it will not be a complete washout, because if it would have been a complete, like, one of those license film that comes on Netflix that comes and goes and we don't even learn that it has come, instead of that, if it trends for number one for a couple of weeks, then it's kind of a good confidence for the producers that they will probably recover the money they put in the film. So
Yeah, and it has
I
proved,
think that's a good start.
it's a very good start. And what Cargo's done is it has proved that there is an audience for this kind of storytelling, that there is an audience for this genre, right? That people are, I mean, of course, I mean, like I said, if you look at all the movies that are becoming hits in India, they're all superhero movies, science fiction movies, and people are waiting for Nolan's next, and it's a completely science fictional film. So which means that we're ready, and if we have and I don't think there's a dearth of ideas or creators or writers in India who can deliver on that. And it was nice to see reviews of Cargo in an inverse, and variety and all. You usually don't see Indian content reviewed in such Western publication, which is which is why I was sort of. And the scene is very similar even in Indian publishing, unlike the West, which has speculative fiction imprints or dedicated science fiction imprints. Here, the same publisher who's publishing litfic or who's publishing history, non-fiction, children's fiction is also publishing SF novels. But if I had to draw a parallel to Cargo, like with Chosen Spirits becoming shortlisted, people taking notice of that, they'll probably say, okay, where's the next one coming from? And like you mentioned, if somebody makes a good series out of a Turbulence or a Simoquin, or even Analog Virtual or Gautham Bhatt a Wall, it's brilliant. I mean, so much so that there's this publisher called Golans, right? It's the oldest science fiction imprint. It's a dedicated science fiction imprint of the UK. And in 2019, earlier last year, they came out with an anthology called the Golans Anthology of South Asian Science Fiction, right? Dedicated to science fiction fantasy from the South Asian region. I mean, of course, it had only the partition 3, not so much from Sri Lanka or Nepal. But this shows that even Western publishers or Western audiences are looking at this region and saying, hey, there's potential here. I mean, we do have readers here. At the same time, we have creators here. So, why don't we encourage that? And that book was a bestseller, so to speak. So much so that the volume 2 of the Golan's science fiction anthology has already been commissioned. Stories are out, and I think it's going to be published next year amongst many other SF books
Nice.
and all of that.
Yeah.
So that and so that way, and if
No, I
you
agree. And I think even in the West, people are looking for Eastern narratives. They are looking for Eastern science fiction story because they've exhausted they've exhausted their writers. And of course, there are new writers coming out in the West as well. Like there's no stopping that. But they are like, I think, for example, a very good example is Ted Chiang or Arrival. I mean, Ted Chiang, of course, you can always debate whether he's from the West because he works in Seattle and he studied there, but of course his sensibilities are true and indeed, so I mean, Eastern, his sensibilities, stories are very true to his roots, or Louis Fiction, like The Wandering Earth. So people are looking at Eastern writers, and it will be very exciting to see an Indian author break out, like his stories. Like it will be amazing that an Indian author writes a short story that goes on to become a film like Arrival. I think it will be so fantastic.
I mean, I don't think the day is long past. I mean, because if you see the way Chinese science fiction is taken off, it's not that science fiction didn't exist in China. It was there from the longest time, but it took one three-body problem to win the Hugo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and you need
Yeah.
that one Ken Liu, who will translate it and take
Yeah.
it to the Western market, or
Yeah.
and then people are like, hey, where did this book come from? Oh, it's
Yeah.
Chinese. Let's see who are the other writers out there. And then the movie got made. The Wandering Earth movie got made. It's became a hit, and now you have so many, be it Chen Fan and all. Lots of these people are now getting published in the West, and Chinese science fiction is this next big thing. But as it's made out to be, it was not sort of sui generis emerged in 2014. And I think the same thing will happen with Indian writers as well. I mean, if you look just the past year itself, we've had writers like Shivram Das, Nivedita Sen, being nominated for the Hugos and the Nebulas.
Yeah.
Right. And in the past, I mean, even Gautham Bhatia, whose wall I just mentioned, he's been nominated, as part of the Strange Horizons team for this thing. Mimi Mondal has been nominated. Aishwarya Subramanian has been nominated. So a win is, and it's accelerating. These nominations and these readerships and all are, accelerating. And I don't think it's, too far when an Indian author will win a Hugo or a Nebula, or before that, something gets made into a global OTT series or a web series.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, I mean, you can feel it in the air that it's just a matter of time. It's about to happen. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when.
I also think that already a few cool series are getting made as we speak in India on science fiction. So let's see, like there's Anand Gandhi, some very good directors whom I've known from the past who are excited about science fiction are also venturing into science fiction. There was one series called JL50 on Sony Live. And I know Anand Gandhi is making one science fiction series. And yeah, I mean, a lot of things, like I am also writing more science fiction, like we are getting that confidence, right? And now there are 2-3 people interested in our science fiction. So it's exciting time for us also as creators. So I'm pretty sure that and that's how you break out. I think that's how it happens, like gradually by doing more work and showing it to more people and as such. So I think it's
And if you expand the ambit of spec fic beyond science fiction, fantasy to also include horror, right? We've already had Betal this year.
Yes.
We had Betal this year, sort of period drama, zombies, undead, fantasy, and with a good setup for a sequel. So I think that is coming.
And I think there's one more zombie film is coming. There's by Aditya Kriplani. It's a very insane zombies in Maharashtra. Something, it's like zombies in Dombivli, something like that.
Zombivli.
Zombivli,
Zombivli. It's about zombies in Dombivli. That's out next year. I saw the teaser trailer, and
Yeah. So that's also coming. So I think people are in general pushing the boundaries. A lot of time people venture out and do the science fiction, but they don't realize they're doing science fiction. So I sometimes feel I should probably camouflage my science fiction, inside a human story and say, okay, this is the story about father and son, but actually there's inside there's a science fiction. So that's
All,
also sometimes I was tempted to do in the past. Like,
you see, all good science fiction stories are human stories. Like you said, it's not really about the tech
yes,
or
yes,
showing cool gadgets. It's about examining the human
examining,
condition
yes,
or putting the lens on the future, right?
yeah.
What if this goes on? What if, it's all
Yeah,
about
what if
examining the
a faulty
present. And
societal construct goes on, and then how it will extrapolate itself and how it will turn out?
exactly,
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah,
good way to examine, which is where, like, to go back to what you said about Philip K. Dick, while I may not, the characters are not us or the setting is not us, some of the philosophical themes are universal,
yeah,
cutting across all.
yeah,
and,
yes,
and there's a
yes.
lot of, and I mean, apart from Malayalam, there's a lot of thing happening even in Kannada as well. I mean, there's this upcoming science fiction film called Mysore Masala, the UFO incident.
Wow,
Yeah, it's called Mysore Masala, the UFO
I'm
incident.
buying first day for sure. Yeah.
No, I mean, given the current situation, I think first day for sure will happen in our living rooms.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Yeah,
directed by Ajay Sarpekshkar, and it has Anant
yeah,
Nag and Prakash
yeah.
Belwadi, and it's got these spaceships and aliens coming in. I think it's in post prod, and the CGI work is going on the spaceships and all of that. So
Nice, nice. Wow.
right, and there's some sort of a fantasy film called Turtu Nirgamana, which is coming. Is a guy who's dead gets a chance to come back to life and relive the last 3 days of his life. So I mean, all in all, good days ahead.
Yes,
It's on a high. Let All I can see is let it go higher, right? And
yes.
let Indian SF live long and prosper.
Yes, I know. We need to claim back the magic of our mythology. In fact, I was reading some Harvard paper which spoke about this, which said that, like, I was basically researching for something. I was researching on the history of scientific inventions in ancient India as such. And they said that, like, we have managed to preserve the art. We have managed to preserve, we have a sense that we had a rich architecture and the art, but the whole engineering that we did, that all got lost, and there are like papers and papers on that. So it was very interesting to read, and I was like, and that probably also fueled. So for example, when this was a space rush in US in 1960s, there's so many space films came in, and now we are back on that space rush. So how, like, I think now the realities of us also is very, people are talking about going to Mars. There's Elon Musk, and there's all this, like, whatever, people throw those things. So this, so I think that will also fuel in general, because now we are also ready as a society to see the potential of science, like in terms of science fiction. So I think it's a good time that way also, in terms of where we are in terms of a technological development as civilization. So it's probably going to come back. Yeah.
I guess that's a nice optimistic note to end on. I mean, I know for sure I can keep going on, and I'm sure you have enough to talk. I mean, even if we had
Yes,
gone on we can
yes,
go on for another hour, just
yes, yes,
talking only about myth and science fiction. But I guess, on that
yeah,
optimistic note,
yes.
I think we can sort of end this session.